Hello everyone, welcome to our large data set exercise. In this exercise, we're going to learn how to freeze a particular row, and we're going to learn new functions, such as countif, average, concatenate, vlookup, countifs, and averageif, as well as sumifs. So that's just kind of a sampling what we're going to be doing today. And to do this, we have a couple of different tabs down here. The first one is the data tab, and it's really common to have something like this in Excel or Sheets. And it's just kind of like an entry of different data for, in this case, it looks like it's, a data set for maybe employees, where you have like an ID number, maybe a first name, last name, gender, country, age, date, maybe like a hiring date or something, and a salary. And this is a repeating sample set. I kind of cheated a little bit. I think it repeats several times, but I did it to where it reaches all the way out to 1,000. So we have quite a bit of data here. And when this happens, generally, you're going to want to keep track of what your headers are as you scroll through. And the really easy way to do this in Sheets is to just kind of highlight the row you want to have frozen. If you go to the View menu up here, you click once, click Freeze, and freeze one row. You can freeze many rows if you'd like, but in most cases, it's usually just one row as the header row. And when you do that, you can see as you scroll down, then everything kind of stays put, and you can kind of tell which category is which as you scroll down. So that's just the first thing. It's a real quick tip to keep track of what your headers are as you're scrolling through a data set. But now let's take a look at some other functions that might be pretty commonly used in something like this. So if we go to our Analysis tab, we click here, you can see there's a couple of things we might want to learn from this data set. So for example, if we wanted to see what number was male, we'll say here, in that data set. So you could go to the data tab, right, and you could look under this D column, you can count up, however many are male, and this would take a really, really long time. So luckily, Sheets has a built-in function that'll help us determine how to do this. So let's go back to our analysis, and in A2, I'm going to go ahead and start typing out this function, which we're going to use the countif function. So what this is going to tell us is, okay, I want to count if. You see, the second I open that up, it's going to tell us a little bit about the function. We're going to give it the range, the particular range that we're going to want to count from, and the criterion. So this could be, if it's a number set, it could be greater or less than a certain amount. Or in this case, we could actually have it match the exact string, which is another way of saying like a series of characters put together. Count to see if it's a string match. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to count the range on our data tab. I'm going to leave that open, and I'm just going to click D. And you can see when I do that, now we have our range as data, exclamation point D colon D. And that's kind of shorthand for basically the entire D column on the data tab. You can see the data, it's labeled data down here. So it's data exclamation point because it needs to find that from this particular tab. And then D colon D. It's kind of the same as saying D2 colon D 1001 because that would be the entire D column as well. But in this case, I'm just going to leave it as D colon D, and I'll count the entire column. And that'll actually be nice if we increase the data set. It'll always include the entire range, and so we're going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to hit comma, and then I'm going to put the criterion. In this case, I'm looking for male, and I'm going to put that in quotes, and that's what we're looking for. And you can kind of see it's already told me it's found 240. This little blue indicator here, it's already kind of cheating for me. And that seems about right. That's a subset of 1,000. That seems about right. So I'm just going to hit enter. And when I do that, it pops in 240. Now we can kind of check this. In our data set, we just have male or female, and it's 1,000. So let's go ahead and try to do the same countif function. Well, let's check for female this time. So if I go in here and say equal countif, and I'm going to give it that same range, click on data, click on the gender, go back to analysis, and then I'm going to look for comma. The second argument is female. So I'm going to put that in quotes, close the parenthesis, hit enter, and 760. And you can kind of see that adds up to exactly 1,000. So that makes me feel that that is pretty accurate. So that's a countif function, and you can do the same countif for determining in the data set the people that are under the age of 40, for instance. So to do that, let's go ahead and click in our little box here and start typing equals countif. Now for the range in this case, we have to look at our data, and we have to actually use the F column because that's where our ages are located. So I'm going to click on F. That's what I want to look, the range to count. And I'm going back to analysis, and instead of putting in like male or female, and I'm actually going to give it an expression, and I'm going to say what is under the age. So I'm going to say less than 40. In quotes, close the parentheses, hit enter, and we have 840 of the data set, which is under age 40, which seems about right. I mean, there's quite a few that were under age 40. There were some that were above. But let's say we want to find the average age. Let's just try to find that. Luckily, this is pretty straightforward. It's as straightforward as any other simple function, such as like sum. But in this case, we're just going to average the entire column. So I'm just going to hit equals average, open my parenthesis, and you can kind of see it does take multiple arguments if you'd like, but we're only going to need to send it one argument, which is going to be the age column. So we go back to data. Let's go ahead and send it back with the age. Close the paren, hit enter, and you can see the average age is 33.26, which makes sense. The average age is under 40 because there is quite a few employees of the 1,000 that are under 40. So that makes great sense. Now, let's say, for example, you're going to want to find more than just one particular set of things. For example, you want to know if, how many are male and from the U.S. Now, to do that, you can actually use the countifs statement, and basically that'll allow you to give it as many different criterion as you'd like to count. And it is an and so it's going to look for people that are male and from the U.S. It's not going to count everyone from the U.S. and everyone that is male. That, for example, would give you someone male from Great Britain, or give you, a female from the U.S. No, it's going to give you kind of the intersection of that, which is male and U.S. So let's go ahead and type this out, and we'll see how this is done. So I'm going to go ahead and say equals countifs, and you see it is plural. If I give it that, you can kind of see you can give it a lot of different criteria ranges and criterions, many. So let's go ahead and count this out. Let's go to our data here, and let's first find out male. So we're going to go to our data here. Okay, we're going to want to look at gender as the data set, comma. We're going to look for male in there. Now, to in another argument, I'm just going to put another comma. That's all I'm going to do. And now it's going to look for another range. And so in this case, we're going to actually want to look at country here. Country, so we're going to check out that range. And we're going to look for the match of, it's going to be United States. So I'm actually going to have to type that out. And then now we have our two criterion there. And we're going to hit enter. You can kind of see it already says it's 140 up there, which seems to make sense. That's a subset of the percent of male. So it looks like 140 of the male employees are from the U.S. So that's one example of countifs. Now we can do the same thing for female from Great Britain. So if we get in here, let's go ahead and type this one out again. We say equal countifs, and we're going to look at gender first. Let's go to our data. Gender, give it the gender range, comma. We're going to type in female. And now we're going to look, same thing. We're going to look at the country column. And instead of US this time, we're going to look for Great Britain. And hopefully if I, spelled everything correctly, it's going to give us 260, which seems about right. It's a subset of the 760 of total female. So that seems about right. So that's just a couple example of countifs. Let's go ahead and look at a couple of different formulas here. So alrighty, now we're going to look to see if we can find the average age from the US. Now, to do this, what I'd like to do is use an averageif function. So I'm just going to hit click in here, click equals averageif, open paren, and kind of see there's kind of the documentation behind it. We're going to want to give it a criterion range. And then we're also going to want to give it the criterion as well as then the average range. So first we're going to want to try to look at the criterion range. So that's going to actually be the country. So if we go over here, let's give them the E column. And we are looking from the US. Let's go ahead and give it the criterion, comma, United States. And then we're going to actually want to average, if we kind of look, we're going to want to give it the average range. So what do we want it to average? Well, in this case, I believe it was the age. So let's go ahead and close this, and let's just say the F column. Let's close that, hit enter, and the average age from the US is 34.08, which makes a lot of sense. So let's just really quick take that averageif formula. It gets a little bit weird when you do averageif. So say you have multiple criteria that you're trying to compare to average. So let's say anybody over the age of 40, we'll say from the United States. Let's get the averageif there. So let's go ahead and get in here and say, we'll say equal averageifs. And when we look at the documentation at this one, you can kind of see it takes the average range first. So that's a little bit different when you go plural. It's going to want the average range and then the criterion range 1, criterion range 2, criterion 2, and so forth. So in this case, we're going to have to look at this a little bit different. We're actually going to have to look at the average range first. So let's go back to our data set. Now we want to average the age, so let's get in there. Now we want the criterion ranges and criteria. So let's do the comma. Now we need the criterion range. So let's just say everybody from, we'll say United States here. We're going to give them the range of the country. We want it to match United States. And then let's also say, we'll just say age over 40. So the next range would be F column, and then we're going to give it the argument of greater than 40. And close that. Close paren, hit enter. And you can kind of see the average age. The average age of the person over 40 that's from the United States is 50.33. And so you can kind of see those are structured a little bit differently, and that makes it's a little bit confusing, the averageif versus averageifs, but that's just kind of the way the functions work. So let's go ahead and let's try to figure out this next one is the sum of salary for the French division. So let's take a look at this. So to get this, what we're going to really want to do is look at a function called sumif. So it kind of works the same way. Let's go ahead and start typing it. Sumif. Let's take a look at the documentation, and it's looking for the range, the criterion, and then what you want it to sum. So what do we want to look at first for the criterion range? We're going to want to look at the country. So let's go over to data, and let's look at country. And this time we're going to want to look for those from France. And now if it is equal to France, then we're going to want to look at their salary and sum it. So that's what we have to look at next is the sum range. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the H column, and that should sum up everything in the H column. Let me close that, hit enter. And there's the sum of the whole salary for the French division. Now, you can add more complexity to this with the sumif statement. It's just kind of the same way. I think it kind of reverses the arguments. But let's take a look at this. If we hit equal sumifs, let's open that up. Let's take a look at the documentation. There's the difference right there. We want to look up the sum range first. So let's look at the data here. What we want to sum up is the salary. Okay, so this is what we want to sum up. Now we can give it the different criterion ranges and criteria after. So let's put a comma to put in the next argument. And let's just say our next one, we want the country, and we want everybody from France again. And let's just say we want all the males from France, I guess. So if we go in here, we can click on gender, comma, And let's look at male. And let's say we want to add one more because we can do this with some. Let's hit a comma. And let's say age, let's say under 40 years old. And we'll go ahead and hit enter. And that gives us the sum of salary for everybody in the data set that is from France, is male, and is under 40 years old. And so that's just kind of a way to kind of splice out some of that data from a large data set like that using the sumifs function. So that being said, we can kind of move on to another function that's pretty useful called Vlookup. And what I'd like to create in this little box here is I'd like to create something that we can look up from this data set. Just typing in a first name, we can kind of find out, maybe their age or their hiring date or what their salary is. So to do this, what we're going to have to do is use the Vlookup function and use this B5 cell right here is something that someone's going to type in. So we're going to use this value within the Vlookup function itself. So I'm actually going to start with country because this full name is actually going to be the most complicated one. So I'm going to circle back to that. But let's start with country here. And let's start using this Vlookup function. So I'm going to start typing in equals Vlookup, open paren. Let's check out the documentation by hitting that. Now, you can kind of see we're looking for the search key, which we're going to use as what the user enters there on that cell. So we'll go ahead and put that in, I kind of forget what it was, is it B5, I believe. We're going to look for B5 because that's going to be what the user inputs. Now we're going to look for the range. Now for this particular one, I'm going to want to use the entire range because we're going to be looking vertically to rows kind of like next to whatever it finds vertically through the whole data set, and then return a certain amount of rows over. And so that's going to be the index actually there in that argument. But let's first put in the range. So I'm going to put comma. Let's check out our data set here. And I'm really going to want to take quite a bit in this. So let's go ahead and let's go from B all the way down. I'm going to maybe stop here because I know it goes to 1001. I'm just going to type that in just so I don't have to scroll all the way down. So I'm going to put 1001 to kind of include the whole data set. Now, we're looking up country. And so if we look at the index, I'm thinking country. Let's get rid of this real quick. Country looks like it is 2 over, maybe, from where we're needing it. So let's go ahead and just try that. I'm going to actually put in index of 4, just see what that does. And then the last argument is if it's sorted or not, or like an exact match. I usually always put false. And the reason why is because sometimes if it is, it'll return something different. Most of the time, like, you're not really sure if it's sorted or not, or if it's sorted the way you want it to be. And so false just means it's got to be an exact match. So we need that exact match to return what we're looking for. So I'm just going to enter. And it comes back as an NA because we don't have anything in this box that it's looking for. So B5, it's looking for that value. It's not here, and so it's returning not an error. So let's just look at our data set one more time. Let's say Philip here. Let's go ahead and put his name in and see what happens. So in this B5 box, I'm just going to type Philip and hit enter. And it still didn't bring it up. Couldn't I find Philip in Vlookup evaluation? Okay. Okay, and so I'm looking at this. It looks like Philip doesn't actually exist. It's Philip with one L. So if I hit enter, now we actually get this male value. And so let's go look at our data. And you can see gender is 3 over. So it goes 1, 2, 3. So we need to go 1 more over to get the country. So let's look back at this formula here. So instead of 3 here, let's go ahead and put in a 4, hit enter, and now we have our country. That's great. Okay, so now we have our country is France. Let's try to find the age. Now it's going to be the same exact formula. So I'm actually going to copy this just so we don't have to go through that again. And I'm going to copy it down here in age and paste it. And it's going to be the same for the salary, so I'm going to do that one more time. The only difference is the index is different. So we need to figure out what indexes we need to look up differently than 4. So 4 gives us the country. One more would give us the age. Let's go back here. If we want to look up the age instead of 4, we need to increase that by 1. Hit enter. Now we have 36. Salary is 2 more. You see 2 more over than age. So we go back to our analysis. Age was 5, so salary would be 7. Let's hit that, enter. And that gave us the salary. So I'm just going to highlight all this, and I'm going to clean this up by making it to the left. And we got rid of some of our border there, so I'm going to highlight that and put borders back on it. There we go. So that looks a little bit better. So, you can tell that those will work now for Philip or any other name that you put in here. Let's say Kina. Let's look up Kina. So if in B5, if we type Kina and hit enter, it's going to bring back Great Britain 31 and 3259, which is exactly it. Great Britain 31 and 3259. So I was able to return those values for us. Now, to do full name, what I'd like to do is something a little bit more complicated, and it's going to basically be 2 functions in one. So what I'd like to do is concatenate the first name and concatenate the last name on the end of the first name. And so to do that, I'm going to use the concatenate function. So I'm going to say concatenate, open that up. We can take a look at it. And basically, it just says that you can append strings or character clusters together. So in this case, what I'd like to do is concatenate what we've typed in up there. So we're looking for B5, right? Comma. Now I'm going to clean this up and make it kind of output better. So I'm going to actually put a space here. So that'll put a space between the first and last name. Sorry. But then for the last name, what I'd like to do is find it with the Vlookup function. So let's type that in. So I'm going to say Vlookup. And the search key should be the same, B5, I believe. B5 we're going to look for. It's going to be that same range. So we can kind of do this manually again, I suppose. Let's go back to data. We're going to look here, all the way there, all the way to H1001. Comma. Now, I believe it's just going to be 1 over. We're going to check this here in a second. And then, of course, I'm going to put in that false just because I want it to be an exact match. And if we hit enter, now we have Kina. So it actually needs to go over 1 more. We need to go over 1 more index because it's getting the first name again. Let's do 2, hit enter. Now we have Kina Hazelton. Let's see if that's what it is. That's her last name. Okay, so if we go over here, you can kind of see it gives us all the information for Kina there, and we can look up anybody we want in this whole list. Let's look up Chase here. Looks like it's a male, United States, 37. So let's just see if this works. I'm going to type in Chase, hit enter, and now we have Chase Garner, United States, 37, and his salary is $21.54. And that's exactly what it is. So that's essentially just a few more functions here in Sheets. This one's a combination of 2 different functions. We're using a function inside an argument of another function, which Sheets has no problem doing. You can definitely do it that way. And these are really commonly used things. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.